This is Headspace.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Headspace by My Mama Done Told Me. This is a segment of our show where we spend a little bit of time with people who have interesting experiences, expertise, things like that in the world. Today, we're sitting down with someone that I not only respect professionally, but also think that he's a really, really cool human being. He's done a lot for me during the time, about a year and some change that I've known him. Dr. Jordan Kugler, he is here. He's a licensed clinical psychologist, born and raised right here in Omaha. Spent years training all over the country, from what I understand, ultimately earning his doctorate from Utah State.
Yes. Yeah,
University. Jordan's specialty is helping people navigate everything from trauma, depression, anxiety, insomnia, burnout, and a wide range of other things through evidence-based therapy approaches. So before I let you say hello to our listeners, one of the things I really appreciate about you, Jordan, is that you have a lot of knowledge, a lot of clinical training, a lot of things. I mean, you're a doctor, right? Is there a doctor in the house? Yes, there is. But you still talk to people like a human being. And that's not always the case, right? In this line of work. And that is huge. That's a good way to connect. You're never spitting things like that are just flying over the head and that, it's so clinical, even though you're a clinical psychologist, right? So anyway, those are the reasons that I'm really glad you're here with us today. This is a perfect setting, I think, for us to sort of pick your brain about what you do, why you do it, not just about what you do, but you personally, kind of what got you into this. But anyway, Dr. Jordan Kugler, welcome to Headspace.
Yeah, and thank you guys. I'm happy to be here and thank you for the kind words, but this is fun. I'm excited to be here.
Yep.
Well, we are excited to have you. As always, I'm here with my lovely mother as well. I introduced our guest before our co-host.
That's okay.
Sorry, Mom.
Yeah,
I think you did
feel like you're
say
going to hear about that at home, man.
Yeah, I might.
That's okay.
Welcome back to the show, Mom.
Thank you very much, honey.
This is our first episode of Headspace in season 2. So that's good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, cool, Jeff.
I know. It's like, I'm excited to get into this.
All right, let's get into it then. So let's start by getting to know Jordan a little bit. You have a degree, or you have several degrees.
Yeah, I think
psychology.
At this point,
I also have a degree in psychology. I don't use it but I got it because I thought psychology classes looked more fun than business. Tell us about you, and let's start with the overarching question about why psychology, why this world, why do you do what you do?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, like a lot of people, I kind of went into psychology. I'd had some early experiences with loss, right? Like I'd kind of, had some people in my life, that I was really close to die. I had some people, that I was friends with that I like saw go through a lot of emotional struggle, go through a lot of like pain struggle. And I saw some people come out of that. And so I was interested in this idea of like, Jeff, like when I was looking at classes, I was like, I don't know, I don't really want to be, I grew up in like, Papillion and lower middle class family, and was just like, I don't know, I don't really want to be a teacher. Business, like that was still kind of foreign to me and just never really sounded interesting. I mean, beyond the idea of like talking and interacting to people. And my mom was a social worker. And so we, especially later in high school, started talking a lot more about, like human experience, pain, and, what she did and kind of where she interacted with people. And so I was like, I'm going to try this psychology thing. And, first year of school, I was kind of like, I don't know, like this is like, okay. It's like, it was like, a lot of those early psychology classes are like history classes, and then, I was getting close to saying like, I'm probably just going to need to be a business major. And I had, abnormal psychology, went to University of Nebraska, Lincoln, and, Dr. Tim Nelson, who I believe is still there, taught this class. And, it was that like eye-opening experience where I was like, whoa, like this is it, the whole class focused on like, here are the different like ranges of, clinical disorders, symptoms, like this is what deviates from normal and this is how we treat it. And I was so fascinated by that concept. And like probably 80% of the people who take that class, it was like, oh, I want to do that. Like, what do I need to do that? And he gave this lecture of like, it's like he would, it's like he'd done this before, but he gives this lecture, like it's his job. Like at the end of the course, that's like, if you think, I think the title of the lecture was, if you think you want to go to graduate school for psychology, don't do it. And it was, it was an entire lecture that was like, here is what like, if you want to practice this, you need at least a master's. Probably you need a PhD if this is the thing that you're interested in. Right. Like if you want to do this, and it's like, you kind of went through like, this is the research commitment. Like these are the kinds of problems that you're going to solve. Like this is how long it's going to take. If you think that people are going to call you doctor and you're going to like get this prestige, you're wrong. If you think you're going to make money, you're wrong. Right? Yeah. And he just kind of went through this. And then at the end of the slide, he's like, if you got through all of this and you're like, I still want to do this, then you're right. You probably should. And I was, I think, one of the like 10 people who like literally stayed in the lecture because it was, I don't know, the day before Thanksgiving.
Right.
And so I developed a relationship with him, and then I started getting into, some research as an undergrad. I joined a few labs, and I was particularly interested in trauma. And so I initially worked, Jeff, I don't think you know this. I was initially like focused on like childhood trauma. And so understanding like child maltreatment. And I did a lot of work as an undergrad with a child maltreatment lab at Lincoln with, again, Dr. Dave Hansen there and his graduate students. And I got pretty into that and, started looking at, graduate schools. And then, pretty much right before I was, when I was starting to apply to like PhD clinical psychology programs, I applied to I think I got 6 or 7 applications out for child psychology programs. And then I was kind of like, this is really, really heavy. And I'm like, it's like, I'm already kind of like, I don't know. And I was like, but I still really am fascinated by this concept of like trauma and resilience. Maybe I should look at like adult trauma. And like, that kind of led me into, diving into like military veteran research and like PTSD and veteran populations. And so I ended up, I think I put in like 3 applications to programs for that. And then Utah State was the one that, offered to interview me. It was a great fit. Faculty member there was new, and just getting going with her, military veteran social sciences lab. And so that was kind of how I got there.
Yeah, wow. That's awesome. That's a cool story.
It is.
So was there a moment? Was there a person? Was there something? You sort of spoke on it already, but that sort of nudged you toward this work. Was there? Can you pinpoint a moment that you decided that?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I think the pilot light got lit, from my mom and then from, Dr. Nelson in that class that kind of like opened me up to like, oh, okay, this is a potential path for me. But I think where it really solidified for me, I guess I wanted to get like some kind of like real world experience with, in particular, like trauma and resilience and like, kind of like what we can do for human suffering. And that was, kind of before I like finalized like putting in applications and stuff. And so what I did was I joined with this organization called Tiny Hands, and they did work with, street children, and in particular, like children who'd been, gone through some pretty horrific things in Nepal. And so I moved to Nepal for a summer for about two months with this organization. Those 2 paintings above you, Kathy, are from artists in Nepal. And so I was there for 2 months, and we worked with this. And it was myself and several other people roughly my age that were kind of interested in the same things. It was it was partially a Christian ministry, but the focus of the work was on empowering. They sponsored these, more or less like foster homes. And so these Nepali parents would take in, these children who'd been through like pretty, horrific trauma. Some of them have been living on the streets in Kathmandu for, months. Goodness. And so our work was on, kind of helping them understand like, hey, this is what a trauma behavior looks like, right? Like this big explosion that you're seeing, like here's how we actually need to, respond to it. Here's what you can do to like form safe attachments. And so we did that for a couple months, and that was like the thing that really made me go, yeah, like this is what I want to do. Like this is, if it's,
that would make you or break you.
Yeah.
It would.
Yeah.
Like, no, thank you.
Yeah. And that's, that's setting that place. It's an amazing amazing and impoverished, challenging place. And so I came back with, with a lot of energy that like, this is what I want to do here in like the long term and find a career path within this. And that's what kind of like really, I think, lit the fire to say, yeah, I'm going to go through with this, I don't know, 6 years of school after after undergrad and be like, yeah, I think I want to do that and, live like a student for most of my 20s and all that.
Right.
And,
So coming out of that and into, fast forward to how many years you've been doing this, are you getting the kind of like what brings you joy in the work that you're doing now? Is it the same kind of feeling you were getting when you were in Nepal? Is it something different as you've matured and grown in your craft and in your line of work?
It's a good question. It's I think it's both. I mean, it is the same feeling. Like, I really, as a therapist, like I kind of value being I guess I value being in the pit. I'm not a therapist who like shies away from complex cases or shies away from like talking about suicide, talking about like trauma, talking about like real pain. And like, because I believe that they're, a lot of the skills and intervention, like that was kind of the work I did was like, what do we do for those people? Right. Like I understand, like these interventions and a lot of people will get better of just having a stable, problem solving, warm relationship in their life. But like, what about the people who are like, everything's on fire all the time?
Are there, are there therapists that, or what's the right term? Counselor, therapist, psychologist? Is that?
Yeah. I mean, they all like certainly, they all refer to this work of like sitting in a room with someone else and, the exchange of like, having a therapeutic relationship and again, like a talk therapy space, right? Counselor, psychologist, and therapists all do that, right? They more or less like those terms actually kind of like refer to the type of training you had. So there is like counseling programs, right? Which is a little bit less focused on clinical disorders and the evidence-based treatments that go with those, and more on, this is like getting into the weeds a little bit. It's more on like the humanistic connection, maybe a little bit more like social justice, social like life adjustment of a focus, like and those will go all the way up to like PhD programs. So counseling masters, you can get a counseling PhD. And then, a therapist, that is like, I go by that, but that also like includes a group that would include like social workers, master's level social workers, things like that. A psychologist is a pretty specific, training term that means you got a PhD or what's called a PsyD, a doctorate in psychology, just a slightly different type of degree than a PhD. And it means that you've had really intensive training, understanding, clinical disorders, the treatments that go with it, and you've also added to the research in that area. And so and PhD level psychologists are the only ones from that group who can complete psychological assessments, provide, diagnoses and at least, kind of across the range. And
just one step down from a psychiatrist.
So psychiatrists are medical doctors who then complete a additional training in psychology, and so they can prescribe, but typically a psychiatrist has actually significantly less clinical training, like on how to sit in the room and how to deliver behavioral interventions than a psychologist would. So like if you're thinking about like if what you want to do is change your behavior, understand your thoughts, your emotions, and make changes in your life, a psychologist is the one who's going to have likely, like they may not be the best at this because everyone's like, there's unbelievably talented therapists, unbelievably talented counselors, unbelievably talented psychiatrists. And, there's a range with everyone, but they will, exactly. Yeah. There's a range. Yep. But a psychologist is likely to have the most, at least professional training in that. So,
The initial question though, so you had mentioned, I'm not a psychologist that shies away from people with suicidal thoughts and like the really tough. There are psychologists that do shy away from that.
Yeah. I don't know if
this is my naivety maybe, but it's kind of what you're there for, is it not?
No, I think like I'll hold up an opposite side to shy away. Like, look, we all, not every doctor is equipped to treat cancer, right? Not every doctor is equipped to treat,
kind of thing.
And,
that makes sense.
And psychologists the same way, like while we all have most of us especially psychologists have training in like, hey, here's what this looks like and here's how to assess for it. Not everyone is comfortable or well suited for that population, right? And so they might understand it and say, wow, like, okay, you've had suicidal thoughts for this long, and you're actively self-harming, or you've got this overwhelming, so many things going on in your life that are challenging. I'm just not the fit for you. Like, you need to go see Jordan, or you need to go see
they might be fit for marriage counseling.
Yeah,
they
yeah,
might be fit for
I mean, people have specialties in depression. I mean, like I'm not the best fit when I don't think I'm a super effective like couples counselor, right? Like I have a hard time like, sitting in the middle of a relationship. Yeah. No, I get it. No, it's I don't know. I think maybe that's why it's like I love my wife and we have a great relationship. So sometimes I'm kind of like, hey,
is this really that
man,
hard?
You got to do more in your life. Like quit expecting your wife to do all this, all right? Or I'm like, hey, like quit jumping on him for everything. Like, and so I kind of like my style is maybe like not as patient where I'm like, you have shit to do and it's not her fault, right? Like, and so that's
good.
Bunch of different types of mental health therapy techniques out there, many of which you are trained, certified for, practice on a daily basis. You've got things like DBT, which is
so DBT.
You don't have to go into it. Just
dialectical behavior therapy.
Okay, EMDR, eye movement desensitization, or something like that.
And reprocessing therapy, I think is I think that's the last R. Yep.
CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, exposure therapy. And I'm slapping my mom's hand since we don't have video.
Question in the front row.
Mom.
I worked in the psychological field for 10 years as a business office manager. I never heard of these things. Are they new?
Well, so there's always been, different interventions or approaches. Like if you think about, the history of psychological intervention, right? Like Freud, kind of pioneered psychodynamic therapy, right? And so that was the first, like, all right, if you sit down in this room with me and like we're going to talk about your dreams and we're going to talk about your relationship with your mother and and that's all the psychodynamic therapists right now listening to this are lighting their torches to come to my office. But but that so that's the first example though of like an intervention, right? And so then we called it like we essentially group these interventions into 3 waves, right? And so you have, again, like the, kind of like the psychodynamic wave. And then you have, this, kind of behavioral therapy, which was really, really focused on these ideas of like, every behavior in life is either like reinforced or punished. And so these are, like Skinner, Steve Hayes, like all of these really behaviorally focused psychologists that were trying to understand like why do we do what we do, and they looked at a lot of like animal research, right? And then cognitive behavioral therapy kind of came out of like the tail end of like, I don't know, my history is probably like lacking a little bit here. I can't remember what the exact wave of it, but there was then like a really big emphasis on thoughts, the understanding thoughts, and cognitive behavior therapy is, I think still to this day, like the most well-researched and well-supported intervention for treating really a lot of conditions. And a lot of what we know about different therapies or like different other therapies that work stemmed from the work in cognitive behavior therapy. So cognitive behavior therapy, like that is still like the gold standard for a lot of different, presentations. And even, down to like, even if you don't meet like criteria for a depressive disorder, but you're struggling with depressive symptoms in your life, like a cognitive behavior therapy is still, a really good fit. And so with that, just, I can go into it if you want to, but
evolved into these other therapies.
So the DBT is an example of a third wave therapy. So that's the post-cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness, and kind of like, I don't know, I guess I would refer to it as like the integration of what we learned from like behavior therapy, cognitive behavior therapy with some newer, more updated concepts like acceptance, mindfulness, and cognitive flexibility. And that's where, DBT, acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT is another one of my specialties. That's a third wave therapy too. So
okay, thank you.
Yeah, and then so all these different types of therapy, they all deserve their own, course in college, which they all probably have. And,
for sure.
we don't have time today to go into all of them. So I wonder if there's a type of, maybe you could talk about a therapy method that maybe you find yourself coming back to more often than others, and maybe explain what that method specifically looks like and kind of why you think you see such positive results in those things.
Yeah. Well, at the risk of I don't, DBT is probably the one that first comes to mind, but that's such a big conversation, that, and I don't use that with everyone. So I guess I'll talk or introduce you guys to acceptance and commitment therapy, which is, I would say this is kind of this is what's emerged after cognitive behavioral therapy, and has garnered an enormous amount of research as a something that can be effective for a lot of different conditions. And so again, acceptance and commitment therapy works on this idea of it kind of says we get miserable as humans. We have a lot of suffering when we get really rigid about things, when our responses to stress start to deviate away from our values. Then we tend to feel like our lives are miserable. So stepping out of psychologist Jordan explanation, if every time you are feeling anxious, you withdraw from the people you love and you go into your room and kind of shut down and turn on Parks and Rec and grab that bowl of ice cream, and that's kind of your response to anxiety. And then anxiety starts happening more and more, where it used to just be oh, after a bad interaction with my boss, I do that, right? And then it starts to become oh, when I have a fight with my partner, or oh, now after a stressful day at work. And now sometimes I just wake up feeling like that. And you can see if that's your response every single time, I mean, the meaningfulness of your life is just it just starts to shrink and close in on you, where you're man, everything feels awful. What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
And so, the past approaches, cognitive behavioral therapy would say, let's look at the thoughts that are governing this, right?
Okay.
Let's dive into this and let's figure out, you've got this thought that says, when I feel anxious, I have to remove myself or I will ruin my relationships. And cognitive behavioral therapy has a lot of really effective skills on changing those thoughts and trying to work around them. And so it tends to be, kind of top down, and maybe a little bit less focused, at least initially, on doing something different. Right.
Okay.
And I think
more of a finding what the things that are causing that, as opposed to working on how you deal with those
it's
things?
kind of I don't know, Kathy, I don't know, you take road trips with Jeff and Lauren when you were growing up? Do you guys drive?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So when you get in the car and 30 minutes in, Jeff's hey, I need a snack, right? Or I need, and if every time he needed a snack or needed to pee or was just Mom, I'm bored, imagine yourself pulling over on the side of the road.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Every parent's probably had that experience of if you are really listening to every whim of your kids in the back seat, and they're and stopping the car and pulling over and saying, what do you need? You're just never going to get where you're going to go. And even when you do, it's just not going to be a fun experience. Right. Sometimes with CBT, that's kind of what I think of, where it's if every time you're having this negative emotional reaction and you're having to pull over to change your thoughts, to work on your thoughts, sometimes you just end up deeper in your head, right? And for a lot of my clients, and I don't know, I guess I had this experience with myself when I was learning it, and I've had, therapists in the past and worked on CBT, my mind just kind of goes, and I can think my way into it, and I can think my way out of it, and I can think my way back into it again.
Yeah.
And so it didn't just go away once I had the rational thought. Sometimes my mind was I don't know, man, what if everyone really does think you're a failure or not that good? I think, I can understand the reasons you don't, but and so anyway, so I like acceptance and commitment therapy because the emphasis there is less on reasoning with your mind and more about learning how to
sit with it.
Yeah. And how to pay less attention to it. There's times when it's really, really useful to listen to your mind. And there's times where it's really, really useful.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. It's just
I mean, sometimes you just have to say, I'm not going to think that.
Yeah. My thoughts can exist and they can run, but I myself, I might not actually be in control of my thoughts, but I am in control of standing up and walking outside and sitting on the couch with my partner, you know? And so ACT is I like it because it, the scientist in me, loves how they have tested it. Like, this is such a thoroughly developed and well-backed protocol and intervention. The quality of research on this is exceptional because the guy who did it was a behaviorist. So he was like, if I can't observe it, it's not real. And so like
it puts a little bit of weight behind these practices, and you're not just saying, oh, you know, someone came up with this in their basement and not talked to anybody,
it's
and we're just giving it a trial run here, which you know is what it is. But you're
it's
able
it's not a bumper sticker type of therapy, right? Where things sound good and then you go home and you're like, what? You know, so ACT has this, you know, if I'm really simplifying the model, like we say, okay, so we know that rigidity and like inflexibility and, you know, I'll talk about, you know, those things lead to suffering, right? So what leads to like happiness? Well, it's the idea of flexibility, cognitive flexibility, right? And so if you think of like a triangle, and like in the center of that triangle is cognitive flexibility. ACT kind of breaks it down like there's 3 kind of core sets of skills that if you're practicing all of them kind of in this you know loop, then you're going to become psychologically flexible. And so the 3 kind of principal components of it are, you know, be in the present moment, right? So mindfulness. And so there's all these skills that kind of go from there. And then being open, right? Being like emotionally open acceptance, right? So this idea of like, hey, when a painful thought or a painful emotion arises, I can experience it for what it is fully, but not push it away. And actually, like, that means, you know, because emotions are designed to come and go, that means it's going to flow. You're not going to dam it up, right? And then the last component is, you know, in the professional presentations, they say doing what matters. And, you know, in my, like, when I'm talking with clients, I usually say doing cool shit, right? Like, do what matters to you, right? And the emphasis, like the operative word is do, right? You can't sit there and plan the snowboarding trip. I need you to find, you know, Snow Basin Resort and get yourself measured for a snowboard and wax your board and get out there and go.
Have you heard of a man named Thomas Ansel?
Do you know
him?
Yeah,
Dr.
but
Thomas
I'm like,
Ansel.
I have a name association and nothing else.
I just listened to a podcast the other day that mentioned him, and he said his steps to recover. He's a psychologist or psychiatrist, I can't remember. That his steps to recovery for his people, place, and purpose, and it's exactly what you're saying in a little bit different words. And how about Viktor Frankl? Do you know him?
Oh yeah,
Okay, so I just discovered him, and I'm reading one of his books now, the one about hope.
Yes,
and he talks about people needing to have purpose, meaning, and hope. And that's what's missing right now is a podcast that I was listening to. That's why we're not seeing the successes in mental health for kids right now. It's like the statistics are rising for suicide and overdose and all that kind of thing, but because the United States has kind of removed a lot of the purpose and meaning and hope that kids see. We're not giving them enough of that, and we need to get back to it.
No, I completely agree with that. And I think it, you know, I think that you're absolutely right. Like, that lines up so well with this approach because it is so much of ACT is about discovering what's important to you through behavioral experimentation and then doing more of it and figuring out like, hey, what are the thoughts and emotions that are really sticky that like stop you from doing it? That when you have an invitation to go to a neighbor's backyard barbecue and you're sitting there, you know, an hour beforehand, like, what are the thoughts that show up that will keep you on the couch, right? That'll send you that text, you know? And so how do we
keep me there?
It's like, how do you, like, this is like the skill as an actor about like, all right, like it's important for me to like develop new relationships. It's important for me to like,
hobbies,
like
a purpose,
be. And so like, if that's the thing, then I can't listen to my mind when it says like, this is gonna be hard, this is gonna be awkward, you're gonna be weird because you're weird. And it's like, nope, we actually have to, you need to put on your put on your barbecue short and go over there. Like, you need to go fail in a conversation. Like, you need to go over there and have an awkward conversation.
A couple times too, you mentioned resilience, and we've talked about that before about talking about mental health. I kind of have a old school feelings about it, and you're probably going to get into this with other question, but we were talking, and one of the questions I think was about how perceptions have changed over the years towards mental health and where it is today and where it was for my father, who was
quiet generation.
He was a Vietnam vet and, you know, wouldn't talk about it and that kind of thing. He never got any kind of mental health stuff, but he had a lot of resilience, and I think he was okay. I grew up in a pretty bad situation where if anybody in our family needed mental health treatment, it probably should have been me.
Sure.
I never had it, but I feel like I'm very resilient. And it made me, this whole idea of interviewing with you, it had really set me to thinking is why did I have that resilience? Where did that come from? Is that something that you're born with, or is that something that, I don't know, except that what I came up with in my brain was that I did have meaning, purpose, and hope when I was growing up, even as a small child. Yeah. And that might have been found in the fact that I had siblings that needed to be cared for. And if I didn't have that responsibility to care for them, I might have gone in a completely different direction. If I didn't have my dad on the other side of the divorce that I knew was a healthy place that I could look forward to and hope, there was hope in that, then I think that I would have also been in a very different place. Yeah. And then my Christianity has really now played into that too. I mean, now I really have meaning, I really have meaning, purpose, and hope because of that. Yeah. So I just think it's really interesting to hear how you line up with a lot of this. Yeah.
Yeah, resilience is probably that's the thing that I think now it's always been the concept that I'm most interested in. I remember when I was interested in trauma, what I was really interested in was like, why do some people recover and some people don't, right? Like, when I was working at the VA, I would see, I'd see soldiers and combat veterans who, were completely fine with their combat experience, but the thing that really bothered them was their divorce, right? And then and that was like they were having real trauma symptoms from that. And again, like I don't know, PTSD clinic VA people are lighting their torches now because they're like, that's not in the book. That doesn't qualify as a trauma. And I'm like, well, it has all the symptoms of it. So like, I'm going to do the trauma thing with them. And then guess what? We had success. But like, but like, why would, and then, at the same token, like some people with a horrible childhood, riddled with abuse, were not bothered by that, but were very, very bothered by the death of their friend in combat. And so, resilience is fascinating. And I think you're right that purpose has an enormous weight when you think about like, how do we build resilience? And I think now in my professional career, like this is the thing that in the next 5 years, like I would like to move forward the research and really like practice of intentionally building resilience. And I'm particularly interested in like teens and young adults right now because I don't know, I can hop on a like resilience soapbox here, but
I know. I'd love to hear it. I wish we had time, but
there's always episode 2, right?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk more. Yeah, if you guys want to just dive on resilience one day, sure. Exactly. Like we can set it up. But
if I can kind of piggyback on, so you had brought up, so we all had the notes here, we kind of talking points or whatever, but let's kind of get into that. So Mom, mental illness looked very different, like you said, when you were younger and the world around you and all that. And now, like all those therapies that we discussed, or when you say things like PTSD, borderline personality, bipolar, OCD, ADHD, those sort of things. If you had asked, 16-year-old Kathy what those things were, you probably wouldn't be able to know. If you go ask my, 18-year-old daughter what all those acronyms are, she's going to know every one of them. Right. Yep. So it's rare anymore, not just to know them, but to meet someone who hasn't either been diagnosed with, is being treated for, or knows somebody who does, or maybe is even, taking medication, or at the very least deals with depression, anxiety, ADHD tendencies, things like that. So in your opinion, or if you have any research that you have to back that up, is mental illness more prevalent now? Or is visual? Or is it just more what we're paying attention to? Do we have names for it now? Maybe a combination of both.
Yeah, it's such a like on the nose question. And I think it really does, like it kind of taps into like the zeitgeist of our world right now, right? Like we're trying to figure out like what's wrong right now and compare it back. And I guess I would start with like, historically, like, I mean, we're on the fifth plus, like not quite six, but fifth
DSM,
plus
yeah.
Iteration of the DSM, and every iteration has
really?
added, like, I think it's at least doubled or more the number of diagnoses in there. So like we started off with like, I think like 24 or 42. It's, I don't know which one I'm switching there.
Little dyslexia,
diagnoses, right? And now we are, well over, 100 and I don't know, plus the Z codes and everything. And like, yeah, we have so many different conditions. And then, you add into like, there are some societal factors, like if you want, in order to get research funding, in order to get treatment, you have to provide a diagnosis to your insurance company.
Right.
And so a lot of times, like, for people to like work with me, like I have to give them an actual diagnosis, even if they don't, and that diagnosis might be like a subclinical one, but like I have to provide a diagnosis in
Otherwise,
writing.
the insurance isn't going to cover it.
Yeah, exactly.
Which if I can just butt in there, how ridiculous is a process when an insurance company who knows nothing about either mental health or physical health has anything to do with what gets covered? So not to take us on a huge tangent, that's just so absurd to me.
I mean, and you have
a
lot of psychologists who have to actively work around, like, if I put down this diagnosis, which is accurate, their insurance won't cover it. So for them to to keep seeing me, I have to, in writing, maybe just emphasize the other thing that they do, but I can't put in writing that like, yeah, you actually qualify for borderline personality disorder and we need DBT. But if we put that down, none of your sessions are going to get covered. So we're going to go at it for major depression and we're going to have 12 sessions instead of the 6 months, twice a week that we need, you know? So going back to it, I mean, I don't know, like anytime you add more language and more categories, you're going to catch more things, right? Yeah. Like, you think about a fishing net, like, you tighten up those nets, like you're going to catch a lot more shit. You might catch seaweed too.
And any little deviation is going to make a new one.
Yeah. But I do think that there is like, so like that's, I don't know, that's the one side, but I do think that, at a society level, like, I mean, it's, there are a lot of things that do not promote like well-being mental health right now, right? And like it's an interesting paradox that like as our life has gotten more convenient in a lot of ways, right? Like the advancement of technology, I mean, you look at the general what self-identified middle class families are doing now is like they have more, I don't know, lifestyle things than they did 30, 40 years ago, right? But mental health is like not necessarily improved, right?
It hasn't improved.
And you look at like, you just look at like, I guess if you really boil it down to it, I do think it's more prevalent now, like genuinely. And I think it's a lot of like, I think we have more words for it. It's more visible. So I think that's adding to it. But I think that there are a lot of things just in our day-to-day life that really are impacting it. And I mean, like the easiest example of this is like, if you look at the data on smartphone use, like smartphone use and social media intake and mental health. I mean, the graph is not a curve. It is a hockey stick.
Yeah.
In 2012, the first year that we had, more than 95% of, 14-year-olds and up who had access to a smartphone, the rise in anxiety and depression, it is an L. Exactly. It is an L. And it had been on, that's not a like, outlier trend. We have 40 years of data that shows it's going like this and then it goes like this. And then COVID happens and it's, everything like gets magnified. And so I do think that it is more prevalent now. We also have more language for it. We're catching more shit. And
we also have better ways of tracking it. And, all of that plays into it.
And we have social media that like puts out sometimes good information and sometimes pop psychology stuff that like makes people over-identify with symptoms or disorders that like they don't really fully understand or are fit for. And then they, I think that's one of the reasons I'm careful as a psychologist. Like I actually, I don't know, maybe sometimes to the detriment, like do not share diagnostic information or case conceptions with my client.
I don't want you to necessarily identify with those things.
I don't want you to think about yourself as depressed. I want you to think about yourself as like, when I have this feeling, I need to use these skills and then I can get back into my life because like, I want you to fire me and you aren't going to be a depressed person for your life. I want you to understand it's a thing that can happen and here's what we can do about it. But like, you are not depression. You're more than that.
Do you feel like in that same vein that the stigma around therapy and mental health has changed?
Yes.
And both of you answer that too.
Well, what do you think about it? I mean, what do you think the stigma? I mean, I feel like it's overblown. It feels like to me everybody has to be going to a therapist is like the minute anything goes wrong, they all of a sudden are not mentally healthy. And maybe that's just my resilience. Is like I don't feel like I have a mental health problem if I have a down day. I'm not going to go call you up and say I need an appointment because today I don't feel good. I think it would take something really big for me to have to go see a therapist. I saw a therapist once, marriage counseling with your dad. Didn't work.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Well, I think, I guess I think that's one of the biggest things that's changed is that we, especially now, like I think people are realizing that like there is a benefit from therapy from going when you're not in the midst of an active crisis or you're not in the worst moment of your life. You can use the therapy space if you find the right fit to work on your mindset, to work on again, like just getting more meaning out of your life. I work with several, like entrepreneurs, like business leaders who are just like, trying to understand, how do I, keep myself in a place where I'm striving and supporting and, but like, certainly wouldn't meet, like, I wouldn't say that, they're depressed, anxious or anything. I think they're focused on like optimizing their growth,
support, psychological support.
And so I think that that's a big shift is that, I do think that, I don't know, I would probably push back that I do think it's pretty real that like a lot of people were very, very hesitant to go to therapy for a very long time, particularly in like the older generation, because I think because of the like lack of quality providers and resources, and there were a lot of consequences, like sometimes with your job, like just from like the military perspective, like you could lose your benefits, like you could be discharged. I mean, you could, if you went and, said that you were struggling, like you might be out and from a huge part of your identity. So it was risky. Right. And so I think a lot of that bled, is like was present in the general population too. And I think that has shifted. I mean, you just look at like employers will give you like time off to go to your therapy appointment. Hey, we want you here. We want you working on yourself. Go do what you need to do. Whereas like, had you said that 30 years ago, like a lot of people would have said like, no, I can't tell my boss that, like they might fire me, or they might like not promote me then. Like it might be seen as a sign of weakness. And that certainly still exists today, but like, I think it's much more more open, particularly with the younger generation. I mean, it's like,
it's kind of part of the benefit package now.
It is.
And I know, if it hasn't been made clear, I come see Jordan, and for me, what's been, was I going through a hard time? That was how we got started. But now things have evened out, and it's a completely different type of relationship. And I'm very grateful that I, on my first shot, found someone who I connect with. And it feels like now I can come in, and not to give away any of our, not to dig into that, but I can come in here and talk about work. I can come in here and talk about, stress with podcasting or whatever it is, and just be like, hey, here's someone who has my best interests in mind. Thankfully, I have insurance that covers these, so it's not like I'm shelling out a bunch of money to do that. But and let's just talk through it. I don't have to always, I love talking to my wife about stuff that's going on. I love talking to my family about stuff that's going on. It's just a different perspective and a different way to, and then we have a rapport, we have the background, we have all that. So if I am struggling with something, I don't feel like I'm on an island where I don't know who to go to. I don't know who to burden with it, things like that. And obviously I can feel you chopping like, it's not a burden to people, Jeff. So thank you for that. But anyway, so when a person feels bad, whether it's physically, mentally, or mostly physically, they go to like their PCP, right? Their primary doctor. Typically in the medical field, they prescribe a medication, right? I'd like to talk a little bit about your thoughts on mental health, whether like therapy versus in conjunction with medication. even in my own household, I'm not putting too much out there, there's a lot of medications between those of us who live in our house. And what are your thoughts on that? How they work together, where we might, in your opinion, be off track a little bit, if at all, and sort of where do you recommend a person start when they're, if they're not feeling great?
Yeah. This is another pitchfork question sometimes.
A pitchfork? What does that mean?
Oh, like, it's one of those opinions that people will come after you with pitchforks
Sure.
with sometimes,
Okay.
depending on your answers. Yeah.
Torches,
It
pitchforks.
depends on who you're talking to.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I'd qualify this by saying, like, look, I don't prescribe medication, right? So you're going to get a therapy answer here. But I certainly, like, I absolutely recommend and believe in mental health medication. I think it works. We have data that says it works. And, like, that's my core, my identity is, like, I'm an evidence-based therapist, right? So, like, I'll do what the evidence says, right? And I'm not going to do what the evidence doesn't say. So, like, what I would say is, just know what your medications work well for and know the limitations of the prescriber in front of you, right? Like, if you are trying to explain, you know, mental health disorders are complex, right? Like, it is a moving target. We're talking about patterns of behavior that are dependent on your insights into your behavior. Your doctor's not, with you when you're, feeling depressed. Like, he doesn't see what that looks like. And so it's really dependent on your description of what's happening. And so certainly, like, if you are trying to explain that complex of a diagnosis in your, 15-minute appointment with your provider, they're going to kind of, most of the time have to kind of give a catch-all approach, and they're going to start you with an SSRI or, an antidepressant, anti-anxiety, a mood stabilizer, right? And again, those things work. So a lot of this is, like, I would start with, like, okay, how well do you know yourself and know your symptoms, and, like, how how in touch with the mental health world, and, like, that are you? Medications work really, really well when you have been trying things and not having success, especially things that should work, right? So, like, if you've been exercising, you've been eating relatively well, you've been trying to approach the things that are fearful in your life, and anxiety is just tidal wave after tidal wave every single day, it overwhelms you. That's a really, really good spot for medication, because you need to, like, medication's really good when you've got, like, I don't know, like a 7 to a 10 in anxiety. They can turn it down to, like, a 5 or a 6, where those skills will now be more effective for you. And so that really helps. Now, at the same time, like, sometimes the first one you try, it, like, works, and sometimes you got to go through a bunch of iterations. And I think the challenge sometimes with medication is that, like, because prescribers have their own challenges with insurance and caseload, like, they'll put you on something, they'll just keep refilling you, and even as things get better, they will, keep the same dosage. And so you don't, like, you may be able to, like, taper off of it at some point. And I encourage everyone to, like, when things are going well, like, talk about that with your provider and see if you can get off of it, because I do think that that's, I don't know. I think that that's potentially useful. And sometimes you taper off of it and you're like, nope, need that, give me back on. Right. But that's a really important component. And so that's where I would start with the medication answer. Now, therapy is harder. Like, this is the long road, right? This is the going to the gym to lose weight approach, where you got to find the right fit as a therapist, which is, as you guys have talked about, that's not always easy, right? And there's bad therapy out there for sure. But
can you name a few of those bad therapists? I'm just kidding.
Actually, I mean, everyone here is fantastic. I can tell you that.
Good answer.
Everyone a perspective, but the therapy approach is, I like to say, like, I mean, therapy and medication is the research says that's like pretty much always the most effective thing you can do, and you can do one or the other two, and that also works on average. But when you get a little bit deeper into the weeds, I usually say, like, look, I mean, even if you had the perfect antidepressant, it took away all of your symptoms. If it took away all of your symptoms and you still, like, went into your room and isolated in response to your partner, like, I don't know, like, in response to, feeling something, like doing something that you were ashamed of with your partner, or if you still, like, don't form new social relationships, don't go out and, like, build meaning in your life, what did you really accomplish? You just felt a little bit better about doing these things that aren't meaningful. And so therapy, I think, is the tool that helps you actually make the behavioral changes and, like, I'm not going to overemphasize my role here. Like 45 minutes, an hour with me is not necessarily going to change your life. Like you're the one who's going to change your life. I'm just going to I'm like I don't know, the Siri guide telling you where to turn. And so that's kind of why I think about the role of myself as a role of therapist is to build a strong enough connection with you that you'll be open and honest, and I can maybe give you some insights, a different way of looking at things. And then I can tell you, hey, these are the skills, these are the kinds of things that will help you do the thing you want. Now go do it and come back next week and tell me about it.
Yeah. And that's really what you're saying right now is what I really respect you for that, because I oftentimes have heard of therapists or counselors. I don't know the different, you explain the difference, but I don't remember now. You're good. But be like, okay, go in there and talk to them, but they don't go out with anything. Yeah. They leave with nothing. Yeah. Yep. And just in the next appointment to come back and talk it all through again, and then you leave again and come back. Yep. And so what I appreciate about you, from what you're saying and from what I know that Jeff said about you, you give him things to do.
That's a big,
and he's doing it.
Yeah. Right.
And to me, that's so beneficial. And that's the only way anything's going to work, because then you said it, he's going to make the change. Yeah. You don't do it for him. You just give him the guidance he needs to make the changes that need to happen.
And when we come back, and if we're talking about the same things, I'm kind of like, I'm out of stuff to give you until you do it. Right. And that creates a little bit of accountability too. And it's again, like, that's why you need the relationship too, is so that I can deliver that message and not have it be like, oh, like this person doesn't understand me and is just telling me to make changes. And they don't appreciate everything that makes it hard. Like a quality therapist is going to build enough of a relationship and say, I know that it's hard, and I'm telling you that, like, this is the thing that will do it. Like, what do we need to change, or what do we need to accept for you to
to move on,
to be present with your kids.
And there's such a desire in a lot of the world, not including myself. I think, especially as we get into things like medication and whatnot, for me, it's important to have, like you said, a balance in all these things where it's, there is not going to be a pill that's just going to fix everything. Now, yes, I know from experience, I am medicated. So I know that there is a pill that can get me to a place where I can hear the tools that you've given me. I can practice those things. I can understand and be capable of, with the right amount of prodding, getting out of bed and going to the gym, so that does exist. But like you mentioned, that pill's not just going to take me to go, whew, now everything's easy, everything's good. Well, it can take, for lack of better terms, the edge off enough, or bring me from that 7 to 10 down to a 4 or 5, where I can, I can breathe, I can think, I can hear what Jordan's saying, I can appreciate the relationships I have with my family and with my wife and with, and see things. Now I can start my work, not that any of it's not work, but I can work on what I want to work on. So medicine by itself is a great start, was for me. I'm telling my experience here, was a great start. It only takes you so far. Okay. One more question, and then I'll give you a chance to sort of plug whatever you feel like plugging. Okay. I want to make sure we're not just getting the information that you've gathered over your years and things like that, of research and all that. It's important for me to see the person who also is there. So as a person who does this for a living, who helps people manage their mental health and all that, what does that look like for you?
Keep yourself sane.
Well, yeah. Like, how do you manage your own mental health? It has to be a weird thing. If I'm a person who is a carpenter for a living, it's weird to hire a carpenter, right? Because I have those skills. But sometimes we have to, right? So it's a little different, obviously, with mental health. But what does that mean for you? Who checks in on the therapist?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question a lot. It's, I guess I'd start with like I use this in my life too. Like I'm not like I don't know, like hey, do this thing, but then I, go off and like, I don't know, cope ineffectively and don't talk about my feelings with my wife or anything like that. Like I use the skills I teach. I'm constantly like listening to, acceptance and commitment therapy podcasts, practicing mindfulness and doing these things. And I screw it up too. Like like that's part of my I think approach, like I'm not like a therapist or with like a wall between me and the client. Like I'll be like, look, like I tried this in my life and I fell on my face, and then I tried it again and it worked, and like I share my ups and downs in using this skill, and if it's useful to them, I obviously don't like commandeer the session with my experience, but so yeah, what I do for my mental health, I mean, a lot about like what I talk about. I mean, I try, I start with like my vulnerability factors and do everything I can to like, get quality rest when my daughter allows me to. She has not allowed me to in the last 2 months. But, get quality rest. I exercise regularly. I have people in my life that I like deeply love and care about. I'm lucky enough, it was one of the reasons we moved back to Nebraska from Utah was, to be around the people who we've had like long history with, who have like alignment with our values, who are in the same stage of life, and be able to like share parenting and like community with, and to be close to family and have that support and like be with our family. So I have purpose and caring there. What I do for my mental health, I mean, like outside of that, and like kind of keeping firm limits on like work-life balance. I think for me, like the danger is always like I want to work too much, I want to do more, and so I usually have to reel myself back in and say, no, I will not schedule a client at 5 or 6 o'clock, because that means I don't get time with my daughter. And if I don't get that for a day or 2 in a row, I'm going to start feeling bad about myself. I'm going to start feeling, and then I'm going to get, all this stuff. So I do that. And then, I can't remember if we've talked about this one, but like, one of my like favorite Marshall Linehan skills, which this is from DBT, and it's based on like an entire evidence-based therapy protocol. But this thing that DBT does, it takes all these evidence-based interventions and like absorbs them like the blob, and then turns them into a handout that's like really digestible. That's why I love that program. And so they have this like pleasant event skill. That's the basic premise is like, everyone needs to feel joy in order to like have a meaningful life. Like you have to do things that give you joy, right? So like the premise is like, are you feeling miserable? What was the last thing that you did just for the sake of joy? Like, again, like do cool shit, the premise, right? And so like for me, like it's throughout the week, like I've got to find, I try to have, at least, 1 to 2 things a day that are just for me, just for the sake of joy, right? Whether that's like boxing in my basement, or like taking my dog for a walk, or, playing, like getting really into like, I don't know, creating a character for my daughter, right? Like a voice and everything. Yeah. It's snowboarding. It was snowboarding for me in Utah. I guess it's golf for me now. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes that is not a pleasant event for me. But it is. It is with friends, and it is when you're out in the sunshine and you focus on those things. And so that kind of stuff. And then like again, like when something is deeply bothering me, when I'm affected, the people in my life who like I love the most, like they know about it. Like I don't carry things alone. And professionally, when a client or when I'm feeling burned out, I don't carry that alone, right? Like I have people behind me that I get problem solving from, that I get support from, that help me. And that's what keeps my mental health going.
Cool.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. Jordan, I can't thank you enough for being on Headspace and doing our show today. There's a million more questions I'd love to share. So hopefully you'll consider doing another episode
I'd
at
love
some
to.
point.
This was really fun, guys. Thank
you.
you.
I'm glad.
I'm so glad to be here with you and meet you. And thanks again for what you do for all your clients, and especially for him.
Yeah, she's biased. Where can people find you if they want to? If you want to put that out there, tout anything you want. So, last couple of seconds.
Yeah, if you're you can certainly read more about some of my work and my approach at perspectiveomaha.com. You can email me at jordan.kugler@perspectiveomaha.com. Man, I think those are like the main contact sources. I have a Twitter, but I never use it. So it's like, that's not particularly useful.
X,
whatever it is. Yeah.
I don't use it either.
Those are probably the best ways to find out more about me. If you go to our website, if you're interested in working with me, there's, you can request an appointment, fill out a new patient work. Otherwise, drop me an email. I'll answer questions. I'm relatively responsive, not Friday through Monday, but Monday through Thursday, I'm relatively responsive. So
cool. Well, this has been another episode of Headspace by My Mama Done Told Me. We talked to Dr. Jordan Kugler today, or just Jordan.
Please, just Jordan.
My name is Jeff Kolaski. I'm here with my mom, Kathy, and we will see you next time. We hope you keep your minds open and be kind to each other. Until next time, we love you. Mom, can you tell our listeners you love them?
Love you guys.
Yeah, you do.
Are your hearing aids like whistling? What am I hearing?
Probably, because I've got them too close together.
I was going, what am I hearing? This is going to be bad if I have to start troubleshooting like a whistle.
No. Just don't let me forget them.
Put them. Okay, never mind.
Set them on the table over there for me, would you? Yeah, not too close together. or there. Or there. Or there. Or there. Or there.
Give me just a few minutes.
Yeah, man. Take your time. I'm not in any rush. Okay. You did a great job setting everything up on the away game.
Thanks, man.
You doing great.
Ma, can you hear all right? You good?
I'm good.
Okay. Nothing worse than trying to talk to somebody when you can't hear them, right?
Right.
He knows that really well because partially deaf.